Apparently, Jules, you are the connecting link between all of us today, at least all of the speakers. So I'll let you introduce and why so.
Thanks, Laetitia. Yeah, I feel very honoured to be the link between such brilliant creatives. But as you mentioned, we are launching a new festival in London, but also hopefully travelling to other cities around the world in 2021 and 2022. It will be an annual festival, and it really is all around using immersive technology that has got so good now to help people connect to other people and to the world around them. It was obviously preconceived ahead of COVID, but actually it feels all the more relevant as we're all trying to come out of COVID times. But the content is based around four areas, four sort of theme park zones, if you imagine, where it's around people. So experiences that allow you to empathize and to understand different points of view while also learning more about yourself. Cities, so understanding more about the past and future of cities, and again, your kind of connection to them. And then planet, so another further step out, which is all around reconnecting to the natural world around us and cherishing that natural world. And then beyond, which is about challenging sense of perspective through cool things like spacewalks, because why not? And the connection, firstly with Simon and Framestore. You know, Framestore has an epic reputation in London as just being the home of creativity and has been for years and years and years, but obviously extremely strong in this space. And the festival wants to bring in the kind of very best of London, but we also want to incorporate wherever, you know, as much as possible, brilliance from elsewhere in the world. And that was how I met Gwenael, who has some beautiful experiences when it comes to the natural world, as well as a lot of other things, but that was the connection. And I should just say, as a kind of forward advert, this year, because it's our starting year, it's been quite directed where we, you know, we've got the content that we needed to get launching, but I'm very conscious that I'm speaking to an ecosystem of no doubt lots of brilliant people. And my hope is that in the future, we'll find ways of being able to integrate more and more and more content such that we can become a platform for mass consumer appreciation of beautiful immersive content.
Oh, wow, Jules, thank you. And so, you know, perhaps Gwenael, you would like to showcase this sensory Odyssey you will launch.
Thank you very much. So yes, we're really quite a young startup company. We're trying to invent something that's never existed before by combining many different forms of art and science. Sensory Odyssey is our brand name. We're basically creating something that we're calling a spectacular expedition as opposed to an immersive exhibition, so that we've coined the genre in a new way. And we're opening next year in co-production with the Natural History Museum of Paris in September 21. And we are really still in production and in branding. The next three slides will just present very, very briefly the concept. So essentially the idea is to create these immersive walkthrough as if, you know, reinventing natural history exhibitions in a 21st century mode with making them sensory and digital. So what happens when Alice meets Darwin? The idea is using, basically promising to the visitors that they will have heightened sensory powers where they will be able to see, smell, feel, perceive things that are normally not perceptible for humans. In the next page, we describe a bit more. Basically developing the art of science and of the art of and the science of the senses. So we have basically we're building nomadic type structures that are cinematic in basis, and it's like creating a new form of cinema where instead of watching the screen, you walk through it. We use no words. And you are in 360-degree type of cinema spaces that have interactive technologies And so the screen images interact with you. You visit and travel across the world to places that are normally not accessible. And we reveal all of the kind of the interconnections that animate all of the living world. So the idea is essentially to be able to rediscover the world we live in through your senses, through your emotions, with no words, and create greater empathy. And we are going to be working with neuroscientists to develop the tricks that will allow to enhance that sense of awe and empathy for the natural world. In the next slide, we are basically the idea here is that we believe that if we change the sense of scale of perception, so does the sense of the perception of life change. And in these walkthrough experiences, visitors or explorers will feel literally connected to life in action. So we will be staging, instead of staging circus acts, for example, we'll be staging all of the things that happen in nature, like the ultrasounds, the scents, the movements, the microscopic life, night vision, pollination, photosynthesis, camouflage, seduction, compassion, all of these things that are part of life in nature. In the next page, we have basically shown here what the first showcase, the first iteration will be to open in 21 at the Natural History Museum. It will be a generic version of the concept. So we will travel through the living world in 9 rooms from the equator all the way through the North Pole, basically flying off those pink flamingos, visiting the canopy of the Amazon, under the water, under the earth. So in the next 3 pages or 4 pages, we have a few examples of, for example, how we stage that immersive. Imagine that we are basically creating a theatrical version of a VR experience. There are no helmets, there are no devices, with nothing that people wear. All of the projections are 4K. All of the technologies are hidden, and people basically walk through these spaces. If we go through the next images, and the images and the sounds and the sense and all kinds of other effects are revealed and triggered by the passage and the movement of people. So here we are literally traveling underground and seeing how life underground is interacting with life overground. In the next image, we are experiencing echolocation, what it is to be and feel and see like a bat in the night. And in the next image, we are traveling under the ocean, and we are in ultrasound communication with a family of sperm whales, while on the other side, we are in interaction with the coral reef and all of the life that depends on coral reefs in nature. So these are just very, very small examples and samples of the hundreds and thousands of different natural stories we can tell that happen every day across life, and creating a legacy for future generations that will be able to also experience these in all the intimacy without having to travel across the world and take planes and such.
Thank you, Gwenael. And Simon, you also have a few immersive experiences to show us. It's a very different world, but nonetheless very interesting. So you're going to planets, and it's more sci-fi than the previous natural history and humanistic presentation.
Yeah, that's cool, Gwenael. That natural history one looks very awesome indeed. I can't wait to do that.
We'll all flock to Paris next year, right?
No, that's grand.
Yeah.
So there's some ones and if you wouldn't mind getting the slides up then. So the ones that I've sort of picked 3 projects just to go through, and they're ones specifically about blurring the lines between sort of the physical and the digital. So the first one is this project, Field Trip to Mars. It's quite old now, 2016, but it was truly groundbreaking and arguably still is. So as I said, it launched in 2016 at the Science and Engineering Festival in Washington, DC. And this was a headset-free group virtual reality experience in a moving vehicle. So the concept was to take a real yellow school bus and turn it into a vehicle that was home to an immersive virtual experience, transporting people to the surface of Mars. So if we go to the next slide, and I've just sort of plucked a couple of screenshots from a film that explains it, but the idea was that the kids thought that they were taking a normal trip. So they were picked up from the school and they were to be driven through Washington, DC to the Science Museum. But when the bus reached about 30 miles an hour, the windows that they were looking through that were showing them the real world changed from being transparent windows and became windows showing the surface of Mars. So then the movement outside the windows was matched exactly to the movement of the bus. So when the bus turned a corner in real life, it turned a corner on Mars. When the bus sped up or slowed down or even went over a tiny bump, all of that movement was matched on the screen. So the experience felt very much like you were on a bus driving around the surface of the red planet. So we had to invent technology for that didn't exist at the time, but it was a great experience. And importantly, it demonstrated that there was a huge opportunity to be educated as much as to be entertained. So the next one, all rather space themed. This was a project for Samsung. And their concept was that few in life got to walk on the moon or will get to walk on the moon. And Samsung was all about do what you can't. That was their slogan at the time. So we joined their mission to bring space travel to all. This was during the approach to the 50th anniversary of the first lunar landing. So if we go to the next slide, Moon for All Mankind. This was the world's first lunar gravity simulation VR experience. And we actually created this in collaboration with NASA. And it was using the Samsung Gear VR and a custom built rig. So once in the rig and you had the headset on, you see yourself on the surface of the moon, and the harness creates the sensation of lunar gravity. So it lifts and suspends you so that as you jump in the physical world, in the virtual world, you will travel the distance that the energy you exerted would have propelled you. So you know, as you're jumping forward, the rig is kind of lifting you up, pulling you back, lifting you up, pulling you back because you're contained in one space. But really, you feel like you've got agency to bounce around on the surface of the moon, it was pretty cool. That makes either people come out screaming with delight or throwing up in horror. So the next one is Twilight Saga. So this is a theme park ride. So sort of taking some of those learnings that we've done on previous projects and kind of scaling them up into themed attractions in a theme park ride. So one of the most technically impressive attractions at Lionsgate Entertainment World, which is in China, that we worked on, we did about 5 or 6 rides in the park, was this one. It's called Midnight Ride. So it's an exciting group VR experience that sees the visitors mount motorcycles, and they join Jacob. It's from Twilight. They join Jacob Black and his wolf pack in a journey through the forest to hunt down newborn vampires. So if we go to the next slide. So we needed here to design a ride that would completely immerse the visitors. So we worked out that we worked our way out to take a physical motorbike experience and make a physical motorbike experience as authentic as possible by allowing them to interact with the virtual environment in their own way. So physical motorbikes were mounted on a state-of-the-art motion base, and riders used custom designed VR headsets that put them in place into the virtual world. So this had like wind, they had wind blasting in faces and sound, etc. And the motion control is integrated seamlessly into what's seen inside the VR experience. So when a rider pulls a throttle on their bike, then they'll feel the acceleration. When they're steering on the handlebars, then the bike will move, and so will the world around them.
Ugh, no queasiness there?
No, less queasiness on this one. People are just sort of, they just feel like they're bobbing around on a mountain bike, on a motorbike, being chased by and attacked by wolves and vampires. So it's that. Whereas I think some people, one person in particular, who's one of our creative directors, who I won't name, was so excited to be on the moon that he just kept bouncing and bouncing and bouncing until he went green, which I'm assuming Neil Armstrong would have done the same. And yes, and this experience here had a relatively high throughput for a group VR experience. You could get 12 people through at any one time. You split into groups of 4, and you could see other riders. And if you looked over at your mate and waved, they could look back and wave back. So yes, thank you. Those are the ones I just wanted to highlight as sort of physical and digital immersive experiences.
Yeah, they do show this digital combination, right? But one question in these sanitary circumstances is always about the headset, right? And we see you look big and you have these huge installations. You've also worked at Framestore with other franchises like Game of Thrones, and every time there is a headset involved. So how do you go about that now that people are a bit, skittish about putting something on their faces, although there are ways of cleaning them thoroughly, I must say.
Yeah, no, I mean, the bus one was a way in which we sort of removed that need for a VR headset. And what Gwenael is showing you is another version of that, and a lot of how sort of some techniques in virtual production are and game engine technology are converging, because actually really there's a temptation to look for like a single groundbreaking piece of technology that's going to change the world, but that's the wrong way to look at it. It's more about looking at the trends that converge and how you then create breakthroughs. And so if you think about game engine technology and what Unreal Engine particularly is doing, it's getting better and better all the time. That will be and is becoming at the heart of the next gen of Creative Toolkit. You look at hardware, so you've got that sort of software technology advancement. Then you look at hardware, in particular, things like the new smartphones. They've got depth cameras built in, and these are indicators that content is moving solely from being rendered in 2D imagery in a confined space to 3D content being contextualized, and then being dynamic and reactive, and also in our actual physical space. And so coming back to mobile, 5G and edge computing, they're going to allow for faster, better, richer experiences. And I think there'll be a viewpoint through our devices. And then also things like world mapping technology, people like Scape and 6D AI, who are effectively mapping the world to bring a virtual layer and add it to the real world, which we can then access through our devices. So the world around us is increasingly becoming the platform.
Yes, like Gwenael showed us a bit, right? And Jules, you're also using these immersive technologies like virtual and augmented reality, holography, and 4D multisensory film and projection mapping to raise awareness and spread empathy, like you were saying, via a mass consumer event. So why did you make that choice of technologies? Do you think they will have more of an impact than the regular ones we're using today? And that's my first question. And since we have to go a bit faster, you went for a B2C event saying that B2B would follow. How is funding going forward? And have you found a lot of interest in funding partners so far?
Well, so perhaps just to comment on the technology, I think Simon's absolutely nailed it, which is to say that I think there has been such a culmination of supporting technologies, converging technologies, but the other angle I would add to that is the content. So much brilliant content now being designed specifically with these technologies in mind. And so why did we use immersive specifically? It was because I kind of felt that there was this tipping point where everything was coming together to a point where it is so compelling. And because there is so much better now depth perception, some of the early issues around queasiness or heavy cumbersome technology and headsets, all of that has moved beyond, but also the sophistication of the content with this technology in mind, again, has come in leaps and leaps and leaps and bounds. And I think when we think about life, I mean, I know, again, it is interesting when this year and quarantine and all the rest of it, but one of the things that struck me about this technology is that it stops you in your tracks. You go from being very, very busy and tending to skim. So even if you're watching a film, sometimes, you're also WhatsApping or you're very rarely in life do you focus. And the thing that I find so powerful about where we talk about sort of tech-enabled empathy is using technologies that stop you in your tracks because they are so encompassing and powerful because they are so.
And it's soothing. It's very soothing.
Well, it can be everything. It can be very moving, scary, soothing. It can be everything that you want, but it's 100% focused. And I think that is why it's powerful. And for me, the empathy, you know, again, in a world that can feel quite divided, actually how critically important that we use technology to enhance our logical skills, our physical skills, and absolutely we should be using it to enhance our very sort of human, our empathy, our imagination, our creativity. All of this can be enhanced through this very powerful kind of experience. You mentioned about funding. Clearly it's not easy right now. But because this is so exciting for a consumer audience, it does have traction. And because of the overlap with all these different worlds coming together, I think it's always very tempting to go for something B2B because quite honestly, it tends to be easier. But the advice I've been given right from the beginning is create something with that mass appeal and the business comes off the back of it.
I like that advice. And Gwenael actually showed it right because he successfully rounded up the funding for his installation and for that huge 9 rooms sensory Odyssey in Paris next year. So
yeah, we thankfully we just closed the second phase of capital increase. So we've raised nearly 4 million euros to kick launch this first production. And we hope that this will be the first of many stories and expeditions we will offer over the next 30 years.
And Gwenael, the Sensory Odyssey uses craftsmanship, right? When we were discussing this together, you really highlighted that artisan feeling that you cherish somehow. And you use craftsmanship, but on a very large scale, and you infuses neuromarketing methods to increase man's relation to its surroundings by generating emotions and also going back to animal instincts linked to our senses. So what immersive technologies do you particularly use for this? Because we've seen you use light, you use beautiful imagery, beautiful production, but what's the immersive part?
I think if I were going to say very shortly, beyond the fact that we'll be capturing all of the images and the sounds and the sense is very important. We're going to be capturing all of the contents of these expeditions. More importantly, beyond the sensors, the UWB tags, the interactive images, and all of those tricks that we'll be having in there, the low tech or the high tech. More importantly, we believe that we want to trigger as many sensory based tricks. And scent will be the main focus for us, using scent to create a real immersion, a feeling of being there. And we are, along with IFF, the leading producer of fragrances in the world, and an extraordinary team of specialists in olfaction science. How do those scents come in with the images and the sounds to trigger those emotions and the feeling of being there, more than any other sensory capacity we have?
So Gwenael, for you, scent would be the next step toward immersion.
Well, that and I would say also the fact that we need to also very pragmatically, I think, be lean logistically and economically to fit anywhere. And we've built this very much in that sense so that it fits in any kind of museum, shopping mall, small size, big size, to be smart, I think, in terms of being educational, purposeful, to be uplifting, I think is also something part of the future of immersion, uplifting feelings of well-being and entertainment together. I think there's an opportunity to have people not only entertained, not only educated, but also have them feeling better.
Like a feel-good movie. but
Yeah.
without the corniness. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And you, Simon, do you foresee senses as being the next step into immersion, the multi-sensory experiences as we've seen them being developed lately, or do you have another tech, innovative?
It's all of that stuff. It's all of that stuff. It's kind of how your brain, it's your brain believing that it's there, and making that experience as enjoyable, if enjoyment is what you're going for, but making the emotional response as real as possible. The technology is allowing that to be better in terms of fidelity and interactivity. It's getting better and better. But it's everything that Gwenael and Jules are talking about, and sort of how that ultimately and holistically all comes together will be sort of how we're creating these worlds, these other worlds that we can then inhabit.
Yes, and you, Jules, this is what you're trying to offer via your human festival that you would like to have to see touring around the world, right? To bring this to many places. And as far as we've discussed, you already have a few places and a few continents wishing to welcome it, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to say where yet because it's not confirmed, but yeah, that is the idea. And the only thing I would literally add to this in the last minute is I think it's important that we don't forget the human element to this. So for us, it's about curating a beautiful human experience, because sometimes this stuff can feel quite intense. So it's about making sure people are ready. They've sort of left their busy day behind. They're ready for an incredible experience. But also when you come out of the experience, we have quite a big focus on thought leadership, but basically learning about what you've just come out of. And that was advice given to us by the BBC that have done a lot of virtual reality with the public. And what people really wanted was they came out, they wanted to know more about the story they just experienced. They wanted to know about the making of it. They didn't want to just be dumped back into reality. So they really wanted that whole experience. And for us, that's a really important part of the festival, is to curate it from end to end.
And Jules, you also were in touch with the Opera House and the Royal Ballet. So it means that this type of immersive installation is getting into stage arts, right?
Yeah, it's super exciting. And it's a massive opportunity for these very traditional and established cultural institutions to take their art form into a whole new world, but also to many, many more people. It's getting to those who can't get to Covent Garden in London, it's coming to you.
Yeah, I have the impression it's the next step of, it's really the next step of scenography, be it in museums or in art galleries or at mass consumer events like you're doing, or also on stage. And that's fantastic, because in times like ours, we really can welcome culture at home and for everyone, meaning, you need a headset and a computer, but I mean, it's available.
You need times like now to remind yourselves just how important human connection, creativity, imagination is. It's what gives us so much emotion. And I, for one, certainly appreciate it more and more, despite obviously the fact it's in such difficult environment at the moment.
So Gwenael and Simon, would you like to have a last say, or anybody in the audience would like to ask a question via the chat?
Questions are welcome, definitely.
Yes, there is so much to talk about. And I'm so thrilled about these three projects. Simon, where can we watch because everything that I've read is either in China or in America, in AT&T stores, for example, for the GOT experience. So where in Europe can we experience your Framestore work?
Yeah, it's very frustrating, particularly for the people in London who work on these projects who don't then get to go on them. But yeah, they do. We've got one that will be in London, but it's a couple of years out, which I can't mention. But it's going to be really great, and is drawing on sort of the amalgamation of a lot of the last sort of 5-6 years of what we've been doing bring a new experience into London, which is going to be fantastic.
So it's what? It's a new
But
franchise?
I think actually and I think there's some really nice making of that. I think that field trip to Mars one, particularly the film, is really interesting to see as a sort of, a group communal experience that's enhanced by technology, that is both entertaining and educational. But the best place to go is to the Framestore. Go to framestore.com and search for field trip to Mars, and you'll find it there. But all those projects that are our immersive projects we have films and making ofs are on our website. So it's framestore.com would be a good place to go to, just to see some of those projects and learn a bit more about them, in case it triggers some ideas or inspires people to do something.
And perhaps we'll have you in Switzerland one day.
Inshallah. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, right.
I just seen the question actually, which
is exactly.
One that I feel very passionately about. And actually it's one that we've been thinking quite hard about, how we integrate a bit of or far more sort of crowdsourcing into what's difficult for us is that we tend to be at the end of the pipeline. So we've got experiences that are ready for a mass consumer audience, but we work very, very closely with earlier on. So the Digital Catapult in the UK, for example, that is all around trying to support makers of new content at the early stage. But we want to see about how we can use our mass consumer to be informing the creation of new content, because I completely agree that the creative community is awesome, but not necessarily always diverse. But how can we through this whole by the use of mass consumer, how can we start to inform the whole chain and the ecosystem? So we're providing a way for creatives to get money, because quite frankly, this stuff is very expensive, but in a way that will inspire diversity the whole way through. It's such an important issue. We're lucky because we're creating it for a global audience, and London is a very global city, but there are so many forms of diversity that we're not yet anywhere near supporting.
Yes, and plus Fiji digital experiences can also mine, they can use the mined data of the customers. Not in a bad way, but to even further advance the creation of an experience by having and incorporating the feedback, and perhaps also, and this is also a next step of the co-creation between the audience and the artist, I would say.
That's a much better way of putting it. I'm going to say it like that next time. No, but exactly right. It's that feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, any other thoughts? Because I think we have to wrap up now, but if there is any other question, I'm glad to take it. Anyone? Type quickly.
There is a question by Danielle.
Oh, yes, yes.
So, in our case, we have been, we started working on this idea 4.5 years ago. And it took us that long to raise also the money we have raised only this year. And we started raising it in the middle of the crisis of the COVID. And we are now opening next year in September. So overall, it will have taken 5 years of struggle to get to. But we're also we're inventing something that's not part of an existing model. So everything we had to build from scratch.
Thank you for stressing this out. It's a long journey, and your success, you've reaped the success that you saw. I'm glad, and we're looking forward to it. So the last question, we're able to take a last question. Yeah, we have to go. All right. Okay. Yes. Or do you have, Jan? Do you have a question? You work in the media, in the multimedia lab, so do you have a question for us?
Yeah, actually, well, I enjoy it. Hello, everybody. Maybe I changed my hat, not being the university professor that I am, but also I work for cities. And so my question would be I work for the culture department of a city. And so maybe how's the best way for public authorities and public policy makers to you know, bridge the gap with you guys in terms of implementing stuff.
It's me. It's the promotional and the evangelization part of the job. This is me. This is Virtual Switzerland. This is what we do. And we do this for our city here in Geneva. That's true. We need people advancing and believing in immersive and multimedia content.
I mean, yeah, and I would just say, I think the more awareness there is around the power of these technologies, I think the collaborations will start to happen. I've been quite struck by some of the work that EY has done with city authorities in London, particularly around supporting adopted children, but helping parents to understand how trauma, even trauma at a very young age, can continue to be exhibited throughout life, but helping people through virtual reality to live and to really experience what their adopted child has gone through. And it's unbelievably powerful. I mean, I have to admit, it's tough stuff, but it's really effective, and they're using it to support, as I say, city authorities as well as families. So I think that we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what we can use this for.
To raise awareness.
Storytelling. It's got to be effective storytelling. Sometimes I think we get so focused on the technology, we forget that we're using it for human impact, and stories are so powerful.
Yep. I'm totally with you, Jules, because the awareness raising part and dimension of XR is huge. And it's being used more and more also to for harassment cases and such. And you can totally combine the culture and that more. We go back to empathy and human and everything you were saying. So it's a very nice way to wrapping this session up, and I'm glad we had this exchange and discussion. I've really appreciated our work together and our collaboration. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for giving us this chance.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thank
all.
you
Thank you,
very much.
Natalie and ArtTech Foundation. Thank you very much.
Thank
See you.
you. I'm
Thank you.
closing the
Bye-bye.
session right now. Back to the plenary.
Bye.
Bye.